Considered by some as one of the most blatant examples of a pay driver in motorsports history, Hiro Matsushita had a pretty rough time in IndyCar. Stuck in mid to bottom tier equipment throughout his whole career, he'd only muster 7 top 10s across 121 starts. The fact his nickname came from a driver being pissed at him for not getting out of the way when trying to lap him basically tells you everything you need to know about how his career went. He's become a living meme in IndyCar circles, and I doubt this video is going to help his reputation. Understandably so, he had some pretty poor seasons in his time, so don't be shocked if this video is followed up with another video of the sorts in the not too distant future. Getting back to the topic of bad seasons, he'd have a pretty bad one in what would end up being his last full-time IndyCar season. So today, I want to take a closer look at King Hiro Matsushita's horrible 1997 kart season. 1997 was really a sandstorm of circumstance that would hurt Hiro's performance for that year. He'd drive for Chiro's Wells Racing this year, the same team he had been with since 1995. The team hasn't gotten a top 5 finish in about 10 years, and they're stuck with a still developing and pretty poor Toyota engine program. Only 4 drivers are running the Toyota engine package this year: Matsushita and his teammate Max Pappas, along with the All-American Racers duo of Juan Manuel Fangio II and PJ Jones. Fangio had scored the most points of all the Toyotas the year prior, at a whopping 5 points. With all of this being laid out, the results we're about to get into were pretty much inevitable. Race number 1, Miami, back when Homestead was basically a downsized Indianapolis oval. Miami hadn't been a good track for Hiro the year prior, as he finished 9 laps down in 18th. To get a good start to the year, you'd probably want to knock off the 9 laps down in my last sentence, but he'd instead take the word finish away. He'd start 26th, only ahead of Dennis Vitolo, one of the worst IndyCar drivers of all time, and Roberto Moreno, who crashed in practice. Hiro would be dreadfully off pace all day, being 5 laps down before an oil pressure issue knocked him out of the race. Surfer's Paradise was a sight of Hiro's last top 10, but it would be even worse. After qualifying about 7 seconds off of pole sitter Alex Zanardi, he'd have an electrical failure after only 16 laps. As terrible as Long Beach would be, with Hiro starting stone dead last and eventually finishing 20th 9 laps down, at the very least he saw the checkered flag. It would take another month and a half for Hiro to finish another race, as he'd retire with handling issues at Nazareth and blow a motor in Rio. The Motorola 300 on May 24th would be the first kart race to take place at Gateway. We've had some pretty bad races so far, but this is up there. On the racing reference page for this race, Hiro is listed as starting in 27th, despite the fact that there are only 26 cars in the field. While clearly a mistake, I don't think I could have summed up Matsushita's season better if I tried. So Matsushita started the race last and eventually finished 15th. Sure, he might have been 7 laps down, but at this point we gotta take whatever we can get. Gateway, in fact, was a start to an 8-race stretch of finishes, the second longest in his IndyCar career. As positive as this was, he would only get 3 top 15s in this time. Gateway was the first, followed by Portland a month later where he'd finish 15th, and then finally in Michigan another month later, but we'll get more into that briefly. The rest of the finishes in this time were really just not good. Finishes of 17th, 19th, 20th, 22nd, and 19th were pretty poor, but this bad feeling must have been washed away from what happened in Michigan. In a chaotic second US 500, where only 11 cars saw the checkered flag of 28 to take the start, Hiro would avoid trouble and eventually finish 9th. It was his first top 10 since Surfer's Paradise in 1996, his only top 10 of 1997, and would see him score his only points of the year, at 4. With that being said, you can understand how he'd cap off the year. For the last 5 races of 97, Hiro Matsushita would only finish twice. After his 8th finish in a row in Mid-Ohio, where he'd finished 19th, he'd then have issues in Road America. He was running at the back in the early part of the race, only ahead of Charlie Nearberg, who was making his second IndyCar start at the ripe age of 46. Hiro would then crash with Juan Fangio II on the lap 19 restart, ending both his race and his finishing streak. He would be the last car to finish in Vancouver, being 14th. What makes this even worse is the fact he finished behind Dario Franchitti and Mark Blundell, who crashed in the final 5 laps and failed to see the checkered flag. Laguna Seca added to the misery, with Hiro making it only to lap 2 before an oil leak ended his race. Finally, in Fontana, Matsushita would pick up debris from the Arie Luyendyk-Arndt Meyer crash in turn 4, taking him out of the race only 40 laps in. I feel like there isn't much I can say to make this season better. With 7 DNFs, only 1 top 10, an average start of 26.2, an average finish of 19.9, and only 4 points across the whole year, the stats really speak for themselves. He was off pace all year, and frankly the only thing that helped him out was the existence of Dennis Vitolo that practically guaranteed he wouldn't start last in most races. Even with that, Vitolo beat Hiro in the championship standings despite being part-time. Matsushita would only outscore 2 full-time drivers this year, those being Michel Jourdain Jr. and PJ Jones, who had bad seasons in their own regard. There are even 5 part-time drivers to beat Hiro this year. I feel like I've said enough about how bad this year was, so to close this video off, I would like to deliver some words with my very limited Japanese skills. Simply put, Kotoshi wa kusodata. Thank you for watching, and have a great afternoon.